This is Filming with Josh, brought to you by Rustic River Media. Welcome to the videographer's home for tips, tricks, and how to make flicks.
Hey guys, it's Josh with Rustic River Media here, and today I'm going to kind of walk you through how to match an A cam to a B cam using a color chart. As you can see here, I have my production assistant holding a color checker video made by Calibrite. These charts used to be made by a company called X-Rite, but now they're being made by a company called Calibrite. And if you've been a part of the Filming with Josh group for any length of time on Facebook, you've probably seen over the years me posting behind the scenes pictures or even screenshots of me using these charts. I have the Passport version, which is this small foldable pocket version, and then I have this version, which is the color checker video. When I'm doing sit-down interviews, for example, I like the bigger one because it's easier to reference and work with in post because it just gives you a bigger image to work with. So Joey here is holding this chart, and this is on a shoot that we did 3 weeks ago today. And it was a shoot we did for one of my clients, and we flew a bunch of people down to shoot 6 interviews. And all 6 interviews were shot within 12 hours. We had an hour and a half setup time for an interview. Then we would shoot for 30 minutes, and that would be that interview would be over. Then we'd have an hour and a half to set up the next one, and then 30 minutes to shoot it. So we did that for 2 hours for each person, 6 people, 12 hours. That was pretty much the day. And this was for like the 3rd or 4th interview of the day. And Joey's my production assistant. He was helping me, and he's holding the chart for us, and we're using this chart as a reference point for the A cam and the B cam so that we can go through and get a pretty dang good match between the A cam and B cam in post. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of how we're going to do that. So we're in Premiere right now, and you can see right here we have the A cam, which is an FX6, and then underneath that we have the B cam, which is an A7S3. So A cam FX6, B cam A7S3. We're going to go from Premiere to Resolve, however, and we're going to do the grade in Resolve, and then we're going to create LUTs and then apply those LUTs in Premiere. If I'm doing a run and gun, quick turnaround project, I will do the whole grade in Premiere. But if I'm doing something that's more intentional or that's got more of a higher budget to it, something I want to spend a little more time on, then I like to grade in Resolve. And I've been doing that for about 8 years now because I just think Resolve is a much better color grading program. So with that being said, we have about a 20-minute interview here, just under 20 minutes, and we're going to grade and create LUTs for it in Resolve and then come back here to Premiere and apply them. So if we hop over to Resolve, you can see I already have the shots pulled up. We have the A cam shot of Joey holding the chart. We have the A cam shot of Kirk himself. We have the B cam shot of Joey holding the chart and the B cam shot of Kirk himself. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by coloring the chart shots, and then we're going to apply those changes or corrections to the actual shot itself. Before we do that, I want to dive into a little bit of how I shot this project. These are just some cell phone pictures that Joey and I took that day, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through the set so you can kind of understand how we got here. As I said earlier, we flew 6 people in to shoot this interview, and we wanted it to look like we went to their locations, not that they flew to us, and we didn't want it to look like we shot everything at the same place, right? We wanted it to look like to viewers almost like we went to each of these different states to shoot all these different people. So to do that, we had to location scout for like 3 or 4 months in Austin to find a building big enough that had 6 different areas that we could film in that gave us 6 completely different looks so that the viewer would have no idea that they were all shot in the same place and on the same day. And that's harder to find than you think it is because we were looking for a specific look, an industrial, modern, corporate-looking building that could give us 6 different spots that not only could look good, but that also didn't have any audio issues, couldn't have a lot of echo or reverb, couldn't have a lot of foot traffic coming in and out. So it took us like 3 or 4 months to find this location, and then we had to pay quite a bit of money to rent it for the day. And then we also brought in a staging company so we could create these scenes. So for this shot right here, it's just a wall. We just took a blank wall. But as you can see on the right side, using the staging company and some lighting, we were able to take this kind of just wall and make it look like it was shot inside someone's big corporate office somewhere. And it was all just how we staged it, framed it, and lit it. For the lighting, we used my Light Dome 150 on an Aperture 600D. The Aperture 600D is an extremely bright light, and we chose that light as the key light for the day because we knew there was going to be a lot of big windows in the building. Windows weren't much of a problem for this shot, but it was for other shots. The Light Dome 150, if you know anything about Aperture lights, you probably have heard of their Light Domes and Light Dome Minis, but the 150 is a relatively new product and is a 5-foot round light dome. It's humongous. And we have it mounted to the 600D with a 2-stop diffusion and an egg crate grid on the front. The 2-stop diffusion allows us to create really nice soft light, and because it's 5-foot round, it's a huge soft light source. And then the egg crate grid allowed us to control the spills, so it's really only shining light on the subject. Next to the subject, I had a Westcott scrim set up. It's a 4-foot by 4-foot scrim, and I just had some black material on it to create some negative fill so that when the light was coming off of this side as our key light, some of that light would be sucked up a little bit by our negative fill and would create a little bit of contrast on our interview subject. It looked really nice. Behind him, we have a lamp that the staging company brought in, and I replaced the light bulb with my own, and the light I put in there was an Aperture B7C, which is an app-controllable light bulb, and I set the Kelvin, because you can set the Kelvin on that light, I set it to 3200, so it has that nice kind of warm look to it. But I wanted to have some light behind the subject, but I wanted that light to look natural. So what I did is I took an Aperture, this little light you see up here, this is an Aperture 60X, which is a spotlight with barn doors. And I basically shot a ray of light down the wall behind my subject. I set the Kelvin to 3200 so it matched the lamp color. And I used the barn doors to control the angle of the light and how wide the light was so that I could have it going down the wall only right behind him like this. And what that does is it makes it motivated by the lamp. So this light that's behind him is not natural, but it looks natural because it's motivated by the lamp. So it kind of, if you look at the log shot where Joey is over here, you can see this, you can kind of faintly see the light, and you'll see it when we grade it, but you can kind of see that there's this light behind Joey, and that looks like it could be coming from the lamp when in reality it was coming from this 60X light. And to continue that streak of light down the wall, I put a SGC P60 tube light, which works on Aperture Sidus Link app, and I set it to the exact same color as the lamp and as the 60X, so they're all the same color. And I put it behind our plant, kind of just outlining the backside of the plant, so we just have this nice continuous source of light coming at this angle behind our subject. For audio, I had a boom mic set up with a plug-on transmitter, so it was completely wireless, no XLR cables. That way we could move fast and not have to worry about gaffing cables to the ground. And this boom pole was connected to my Sennheiser MKH 8050 super cardioid mic. An MKH 8050 is an amazing indoor boom mic because it doesn't absorb a lot of reflections from the room, so it kind of kills some of that echo you get when you boom indoors with a shotgun mic, which is not really a good choice for an indoor booming mic. So here I was using a super cardioid mic, the MKH 8050, which is a spectacular indoor booming mic. If you've watched Game of Thrones, you've heard this mic before. And then over here we had the FX6 with a Sony 50 1.2 G Master lens. It's an amazing lens. And for the B cam, we had the A7S III with a 70 to 200 2.8 version 2 G Master, which is their new 7200. It's one of my favorite lenses right now. And mounted to that is a matte box, and I was using straight NDs. You guys know I hate variable NDs, so I was using straight ND filters here to control the light so that I could run this lens at 2.8 the whole time. And that was our B cam. We had a couple of Sockler tripods. We had the FSB10 on a pair of Flowtech 100 sticks for the FX6 and an FSB8 with a pair of just regular CF75 carbon fiber Sockler sticks for the B cam. And then lastly, we had a sound blanket underneath the speaker just to help absorb reflections even more. And then there's me and the marketing director for the company kind of directing the interviews, and this is one of the higher up execs kind of listening in. So that's pretty much the day. You can kind of see another shot here of kind of what this all looked like. But all of this to create what you're seeing to the right. Now that I've kind of explained the setup, let's go through and color it. So we're in the editing tab in Resolve, but what we want to be in is in the color tab. So we're going to click on color, and now we're in the color tab. And what we're going to do is we're going to grade the shots of the charts and then apply the grades to the other, to the actual shots. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this shot here so I can see the chart pretty well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to this window icon. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click on linear. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the softness from this all the way down to 0. And the reason is this is basically a feather. If you worked in Photoshop or Premiere or anything like that, you know what a feather is. And you can see that as I change this, it's creating a feather. I don't want a feather. We're going to turn that all the way off on our mask. So basically what we've done is we've created a mask that has no feathering. That's essentially what we've done. And I'm going to drag these little dots, these little outlines of the mask, and we're going to put it around the color chips on the chart. Now, right now, I'm not so much concerned with anything else. This is for skin tones to the right, and in the middle, this is like your 90% bright whites, you've got 41% middle gray, you've got black, but I'm not concerned about any of that right now. I'm only concerned about these color chips, which we've just outlined with a mask. So now that they're kind of outlined, what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little magic wand looking thing, which is called highlight. And it's going to basically turn off everything except for what's in our mask. And this is why we don't want a feather, because we want just these chips to be shown only. Now, down here to the bottom right is our scopes, and I currently have the vector scope pulled up. If you don't know anything about a vector scope is a great way to look at where your colors are falling and how they reference skin tones. This little white line is the skin tone line, and if we had skin tones in this shot, we would be monitoring where the skin tones fall on this line. But right now, we don't have skin tones in our shot because we have a mask that's only showing colors, and there's only colors for red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow, and that's what you're seeing here. Those are the chips that are highlighted, and that's what we're seeing down here in the vector scope. Now, you can notice that these lines look really small, and that's because we're looking at a log shot. But we don't want to look at a log shot forever. We want to convert this log shot into something that's Rec 709. So to do that, we're going to click on our node up here, right click, go to LUT, and then we're just going to pick whatever LUT we want. For this particular shot, I'm going to pick a LUT that I like, which is a LUT called Phantom Airy LUTs. They are great LUTs. You can buy them online. They're made specifically for cameras like the FX6, A7S III, etc., to get them to look kind of like the an airy camera. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the FX6 neutral LUT, and that's going to convert our log shot to Rec 709. Now you can see here we have color in our color chips. And if you look at the vector scope now, you'll see how these lines are much bigger because there is color being applied from the conversion to Rec 709. Now, by default in Resolve, if we click on settings here, this box that says show to time zoom will be unchecked, and you'll see how much smaller they are. I like to be able to see it better, so click on show to time zoom to make them much bigger. Now that we have these pulled up, our goal is there are two, if you'll look at red, for example, there are two little lines and two little dots for red. And that's because if we look at our color chips, we have two different types of reds showing up. The only one I'm really concerned with is the top one. So same thing with magenta or blue. You can see there's two faint dots here, two little faint lines, but I'm only concerned with the top one or the bigger one. That's the one that we're going to focus on. Our goal is to get these top dots into the middle of each of these corresponding boxes. So we want red to be right here in the red box, magenta to be in the middle of the magenta box, blue to be in the middle of the blue box, and so forth. That's going to allow us to get the colors where they need to be. As you can see right now, my best way of explaining this is you can see in this shot that even with Rec 709, it's not saturated enough because it's not all the way up in these boxes. And beyond that, the colors aren't exactly where they need to be. Like if you look at the blue here, the blue is kind of leaning a certain way. It's not aiming towards the middle of the box. It's kind of leaning elsewhere. Same thing with the yellow. That's because the colors aren't exactly where they need to be, despite the fact that I even did a custom white balance. So we're going to use this chart to make sure our colors are perfect. That's the point of this. So to do that, we're going to go over here to the curves, and we're going to go over to this little section over here where you're going to find hue versus hue and hue versus saturation. Hue versus hue is going to allow us to adjust the color of each of these colors, and the saturation is going to allow us to push them up into the boxes. So we'll start with the hues, and we'll check these little individual colors down here, which basically gives us a point to work with on this map. We'll start with red. So as I move this up or down, look in the vector scope at what's happening to red in the vector scope. It kind of looks like it's waving, right? As I move red or up or down, it's kind of going up or down on the vector scope, or moving clockwise or counterclockwise in the vector scope. So what our goal is to do is to put it where it's going to end up right in the middle of that box whenever we add saturation. And that looks pretty good. Same thing with yellow. As I move it up or down, you can see how yellow moves up or down. We're going to try to aim it right toward the middle of that box. We're going to go to green, kind of do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing with cyan, kind of aim it right toward the middle. Again, we're working with the top dot, not the other one. Blue, same thing, kind of right toward the middle there. And do the same thing with magenta. Now let's go over to hue versus saturation. We're going to turn each of these little points on. And now we're going to bump the saturation up to get them in the middle of the boxes. Boom, yellow's kind of in the middle now. Green's kind of in the middle. Cyan, push it up some, kind of get it in the middle there. Go over to blue, push it up, kind of get it toward the middle. Go to magenta, same thing. You see how far down magenta was. We want to push it, make sure it's in the middle of the box. And go over to red, do the same thing. Now they're close to being in the middle of the boxes. We might adjust the hue versus hue slightly. Make sure the red's right smack in the middle. Magenta, make sure it's in the middle. The blue, let's make sure it's pretty much in the middle. Cyan already is. Green is. I might bump the blue saturation back up just ever so slightly. Boom. There you go. Now you can see in our vector scope, all the chips are where they need to be for saturation and for the hue. So now we know we're going to have really accurate colors. So let's go over here and change. We're zoomed in, so let's go over to fit so we can see the whole window. There's our chart. Now what we're going to do is we're going to basically deselect the mask by clicking on window, going down to linear, and we're going to uncheck it. And what happens is when I click this box, it's going to unselect the mask and apply what we did to the whole shot. Boom, look at that. There you go. Now the entire shot has color. This is the LUT that we applied plus all the color changes we made in the box to make it color accurate. And if you look back at the vector scope, all of those points we did are still there because the chips are still showing up. It's just now we're seeing more data. You don't have to mask the chips to do what I just did. It's just the whole point of masking the chips out is so that we can focus only on those and you don't have a bunch of other junk on the screen. But now that it's unmasked, you can see the chips are still accurate, so we know we have a good color accurate shot with the perfect amount of saturation. And you can look at the skin tones here, and this is reading Joey's skin tones, and you can kind of see how their skin tones going down this white skin tone lines, which shows us not only do we have a color accurate shot, but that the skin tones look great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to edit. We're going to hit copy. This is going to copy everything we just did, and we're going to click on the shot of Kirk here, and we're just basically going to go to edit, paste, and it's going to apply all the settings we just made to Kirk's shot. Let's go over to the next camera, the B cam, and do the exact same thing. So again, we're going to create a linear mask. It's already going to be checked here. I'll uncheck that for a minute, or highlight it, I mean. But let's turn the softness all the way down to 0 to get rid of that feathering effect. Let's take our boxes. And as you can see, Joey's holding this chart upside down. It doesn't matter if the chart's upside down or right side up, because all you're doing is just highlighting the colors. So even though this is upside down, it doesn't matter at all. So we're going to deselect that, probably zoom in slightly just to kind of tweak it some. And this is why I like using the bigger charts for stuff like this, because it's just, easier to zoom in on. So we look down here at our vector scope. We don't have it turned to Rec 709 yet, so you can see everything's really small. So we need to apply the exact same LUT that we applied a minute ago. So we're going to right click on the node, go to LUT, Phantom Area LUTs. They make them for the A7S III, and this is an A7S III shot, but experience tells me it's best to use the same LUT. So I'm going to use the exact same LUT we used a minute ago, and we're just going to use these chips to get it exactly where it needs to be. So let's jump back over to our hue versus saturation, hue versus hue. We'll start with hue versus hue. Click on all these little pens here. All right, yellow needs to come down a little bit. Right around there. We need to take red, kind of move it. I always skip red, even though it's like the first one. I always skip it and have to go back to it. We'll do green, kind of make sure it's lined up. Cyan kind of already looks pretty good. Blue is off by quite a bit. We'll move it down some to get it where it needs to be. And then we'll take magenta and get it where it needs to be. Now we're going to go over to the saturation. Hue versus saturation. Again, we're going to select all of our pens. Go red first this time since I always skip it. Get it right in the middle of that box. We're going to take yellow. Kind of do the exact same thing. We're going to take our greens, push them up, do the exact same thing there. Take our cyan. Take our blue. And you can see here, this is going to affect our blues. Watch as I push up the magenta, how the blue changes. So because these colors do affect each other, so we might have to make a slight adjustment to the blue after we push this where it needs to go. Yeah, blue needs to come up a little bit more now. And that's pretty good. Everything looks pretty good there. So I'm going to go back to hue versus saturation because the magenta is not in the middle of the box so much. I'm going to adjust that. Everything else looks pretty good. I might slightly adjust the green. But it's close enough at this point. Any more fine-tuning is just being a perfectionist at this point. But everything's kind of in the middle of the box, so we're pretty good. So as we did a minute ago, we're going to go up here and select fit so we can see the whole frame. And then we're going to go down here to the window box, and we're going to uncheck our mask, and boom, now it's colored. And again, if you look at the vector scope, all the chips are where they need to be, and the skin tone is right on the skin tone line. Now, again, we're going to go to edit, copy, go over to the shot, and we're going to go edit, paste, and this is all now going to be applied. I will point out right away, I can tell that the shots are still not a dead match, and that's because the exposure is slightly different. This shot has less contrast in it than this shot. So we need to make some adjustments here. So to do that, I'm going to pick a shot like this shot. I like this shot. I actually like the contrast in that shot more than I do this one. So I'm going to pick this shot as my reference point. And I'm going to go back to the curves here. And I'm going to go back to the regular, which is click on these little blocks right here. This is our regular curves. And I want to make sure that he isn't clipped in the blacks down here because it looks pretty dark, but we'll use a chart to make sure. So we're going to leave our vector scope. We're going to click on over to waveform, and we're going to make sure that our blacks aren't crushed. Another way to check this would be to look at the histogram. You can see it's really close on the edge of the histogram here, but it's not being crushed. So it's good. We could drop a point on the highlights to leave them alone, and then we could drop a point on the shadows and bring them up if we wanted. But I actually don't mind the contrast. I actually think it looks pretty good. So as long as they're not crushed, which I'm looking right here, they're not crushed, they're not lost, I'm going to leave the blacks the way they are. I'm not going to adjust the shadows because I think it looks fine. However, it's not a match with this. So we got the color where it needs to be for the most part, but we need to get them to match more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a frame where he doesn't look too goofy, and I'm going to right click and hit grab still. And this is going to give us a reference still image. Let me click off the qualifier here. Then we're going to go over to the shot that we want to fix, which is this shot, because this shot doesn't match. I'm going to pick a point where he's kind of talking, maybe right here like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go up to this little window option, and we're going to click on that, and that's going to pull up our reference still image. And we can kind of move it around, but we'll leave it like right around here. So this is our reference image, and then this is the image that we're going to fix. If you're used to Premiere, you might know this as comparison mode. And Resolve, it's a little different, but it works just the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the contrast on this A cam shot so it better matches the B cam shot. To do that, we're going to use the curves. I'm going to leave the highlights alone by clicking and checking a little bubble on the highlights so that what I do to the shadows doesn't affect the highlights very much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull the shadows down. And as you can see, you could probably tell, let me undo this. You could probably tell in this shot that the shot to the left looks warmer than the shot to the right. But watch how the shot to the right almost warms up a little bit to match the shot to the left just by adjusting the contrast. See what I mean? It's almost like the skin tones have a little more warmth to it. And it's just because you're adding saturation to the shot by naturally adding more contrast. You can see right off the bat, it already looks a lot closer than it did to start. And you don't have to just do the comparison view this way. You can do it like this. You can do it like this if you wanted, just to kind of see. Naturally, this shot is going to look a little warmer though, because this is a tighter shot of that warmth. Remember I talked about shooting a ray of light down the wall with a 60x? This is it's going to appear a little warmer because we're zoomed in closer on that ray of light. Whereas the wide shot, that ray of light just kind of is backlighting him, and it's not nearly as focused in on that ray of light, as it is on the B cam shot. So the B cam shot's naturally going to look a little warmer because of that ray of light, whereas here it's not nearly as focused on that. However, what we're more concerned with is what do the skin tones look like, and do they match? And we're pretty dang close. If you look at the shirt looks a little warmer on this shot, so we might try to slightly adjust that. And that's a good way to look at it. But the skin tones look pretty good. But I do want to adjust the shirt slightly because they're not a dead match. This shirt is definitely warmer. So to fix that, we're going to go to gain, which is basically highlights. And we're going to cool it down I'm on the wrong shot. Ha! I wish I could edit that out. I'm trying to do this live without editing it out. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I want this shot to match the other one, so I actually need to change the other shot. So I'm going to create a new still. And this is going to be our new reference still. So let's go to this shot, and we're going to actually change this shot now. So we're going to pull up our reference still that we took a second ago, and we're going to change the bottom shot to match the top shot. So anyway, back to what I was getting ready to do a second ago. We're going to take the gain, and we're going to cool it off just slightly. We want to be careful. We don't want to do it very much. You probably can barely even tell I moved it. But if I control undo it, and then control redo it, if you watch the shot at the bottom, you can kind of see how I cooled it off. Now I cooled it off too much, and I leaned it towards purple a little bit, so I want to kind of fix that slightly, which right there looks pretty good. So if you look at it now, it should look pretty dang close. We're not worried about the walls. The walls aren't going to look dead on because one is zoomed in on the light ray, the other is not. It's got more green. But what we're concerned with is the clothing and the skin tone. The clothing is really, really close. I could probably try to get it even more so than it is right now, but it's honestly good enough for me. And the same thing with the skin tones. Anything outside of that at this point is just being a perfectionist because the skin tones and the shirt colors are pretty dang good. And again, we're not as concerned with the wall. We're concerned about skin tones and clothing because that's going to be the easiest way to tell if a shot matches or not when it's cutting back and forth. So to me, this looks really good. So we're going to turn our reference still off. Now we've got just the shots, and we need to get these shots from Resolve to Premiere. So to do that, we're going to click on the actual box of the clip. We're going to right click, and we're going to click on Generate LUT, and we're going to generate a 33-point cube LUT. That's going to give us enough information for a 10-bit log file. 65-point cube is not necessary. 17 points is not enough. 33 is kind of what you want. So we're going to click on 33. And normally I would create a folder. Let me click on the drive here. I would have a folder in the project called LUTs, and I would just save the LUT there and I would name it. But I've already got a LUT in there, so I'm just going to put this on the desktop for now because I'm just doing this to demonstrate to you guys. But we'll call this like Kirk B-Cam LUT. Okay? Then we're going to do the same thing with A-Cam. We're going to right click, Generate LUT, 33-point cube. We're going to make sure it saves to the same place, and we're going to call this Kirk A-Cam LUT. Okay? Now we're going to jump over to Premiere, and we're going to apply them. So this is the A-Cam, so we're going to click on the A-Cam, and we've got to make sure you're in the Lumetri color panel. And then over here where it says Input LUT, I'm going to click Browse, and I'm going to go to where I saved it, which is the desktop, and we're going to click on the A-Cam LUT. Boom. It looks just like it did in Resolve. Now let's go to the bottom layer where the B-Cam is and do the same thing. Click on it, go to Input LUT, hit Browse, Kirk B-Cam, Apply. There you go. A-Cam, B-Cam. And again, I could have probably spent a little bit more time getting the shirts to be a dead-on match, but you could tell that the skin tones and clothing are pretty dang good right off the bat. And just by looking at the shot visually, it looks awesome. You know, the colors on the wall are accurate. The colors on his shirt are accurate. Everything looks really, really good. And so we used the chart to make sure that our saturation and that our colors were accurate. And then we took the curves to make sure the shots aren't just accurate, but that they match. And that's how we do it. So that's basically how I grade interviews. It seemed like a lot of work, but honestly, if you know how to do this, you could do this in 5 or 6 minutes. And so 5 or 6 minutes of your time will allow you to have a great match between your A-Cam and B-Cam for an interview. And once you apply this to the shot, as long as the lighting condition isn't changing during your shot, you only have to do this once, and your entire interview is matched. So in 5 or 6 minutes, I have a dead-on match between my A-Cam and B-Cam by just simply shooting a color chart and creating a custom LUT in Resolve. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope that this explains how I use color charts. I use them also outside of interviews. I use them for, if I'm doing a commercial project, I'll use it for each shot. But if I'm doing run and gun work, maybe not so much. It depends. But if I'm taking my time on a project, this is how I grade, and I hope that makes sense, and I hope you learned something. Have a great day.